let's kick off. You'd had a stellar career, but now you're into doing something completely different. Tell us a little bit about sort of the portfolio of life that you have right now.
I'd just gone into this company not having a clue what they did. And then all of a sudden I was actually in a room with investors and senior people running that company. And it just felt...
Hi everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Places We'll Go show. Now today, we've got another stellar guest for you, Katy Leeson. What do you think was the key to getting those opportunities? How did you guys navigate and when others couldn't?
I am super curious. So I will sit in rooms and I will just listen. I don't overly...
Now she's a highly accomplished marketing professional with nearly 2 decades of experience, really driving growth in some of the most dynamic and fast-paced of industries. I'd love to get your take on how you see the current world of marketing here today. She rose to prominence as the managing director of Social Chain, where she played a pivotal role in scaling the agency from 30 people to over 130.
Give us your take on AI.
And I think if you're using AI to try and do that, it's never going to be authentic.
While working with some of the world's most renowned and iconic brands. Now, during her time, Katy was instrumental in fostering a unique and innovative culture that really did push the boundaries of digital marketing and did set new standards for creative work. Do you think there's a glass ceiling in marketing? Now, following on from the success at Social Chain, Katy went on to work with iconic football legend Gary Neville, heading up the media team for Salford City and helping launch the highly successful YouTube channel, The Overlap.
What advice would you give to people about totally distracted by everything?
Like I said before, our secret sauce was...
Now, as usual, the show is actually brought to you by 2 fantastic organizations. The first is Studio Space, a leading on-demand marketing agency platform that enables marketers to browse and brief agencies, receive proposals, and indeed start work all in the one place. It's kind of like having your own agency at your fingertips, but without the hassle, as they really do take care of everything, from contracting and invoicing to procurement and legal. I would suggest check out Studio Space today. Now, the other sponsor is the Marketing Skills Trust, a charity whose mission is to make the marketing industry a better place by providing grants to help those who really need it to make a more inclusive and equitable industry, a real level up agenda. The Marketing Skills Trust has been instrumental in championing a more inclusive, diverse, and open marketing industry. You can find more about them by going to their website. Alrighty, let's get on with the show. Katy, amazing to have you on. My God, this has been like one of my all-time upcoming, looking forward to episodes here today. So thank you. How are you feeling?
I just feel so privileged. Thank you so much.
Come on. Look, let's kick off. You'd had a stellar career, but now you're into doing something completely different. So was it coaching, mentoring? Tell us a little bit about sort of the portfolio of life that you have right now.
Yeah, so I'm trying to build multiple income streams for myself at the moment. After doing so many jobs for other people for so long, I've now gone out on my own. So I'm doing fractional CMOs, jobs for a couple of brands, really exciting brands. One being Glower, which is taking over the world. It's a hair nutrition supplement. We're about to launch in America. It's just doing really good things. And then Lux Collective, which everyone will know of. They're amazing on TikTok. Went on Dragon's Den, 2 brothers, just doing really good work and very good storytellers. So it's great because I'm getting to pick brands that I want to work with. And then, yeah, I'm doing coaching. So I'm doing one-to-one coaching with some brilliant people. I've coached about 4 people already. I'm coaching 2 others at the moment. And then I've just launched a group coaching as well, which happens every other Tuesday night. And I've got 7 people on my first cohort.
God, there we are.
And obviously doing talks and other things. And I'm about to launch a new business in Manchester as well.
I'd expect nothing less because it's a pivot, but there's still the impact and the cadence. But for people who don't know the journey of Social Chain, there might be some people like that in the world. Tell us a little bit about that adventure.
Mm-hmm. So I've been working in marketing for coming up to 20 years. And I started off, before that, when I did my A-levels, I failed my A-levels. I wanted to do journalism at uni. Why? Because I wanted to work for Heat magazine because I love celebrity gossip.
That's going in the shorts.
And I thought that was I could be a journalist. I could be a journalist for Heat magazine and I can live the life that I want to live. but I can't write. My grammar's terrible. My spelling's awful. So why I thought that journalism was going to be the right career for me, I don't know. So I felt
ChatGPT existed at that time.
if
There we
only,
go.
I would have been fine. I would have been fine. But yeah, so I failed my A-levels to get into journalism. So I had to go through clearing. And I went to Liverpool John Moores through clearing on a course called Media and Cultural Studies. That's when I learnt about all this world of media and marketing. Didn't know it existed before, and found out there was all these companies that did media planning and buying. And it's something just sparked in me. I've always loved adverts. There's been something about creativity and adverts. And I think it's the Gorilla Cadbury ad has just kind of stuck with me. And the Tango ad, when the man was running around slapping people, there was just certain ads of the like 90s that used to just stick in your brain. And those, I think, were just there, always there in front of my mind. So I started as a grad media planning and buying. So I was buying press, radio and outdoor. Did that for a few years, went to work for MediaCom, which is one of the big agencies, and did that for another few years, but realised I kind of was getting I could do it with my eyes shut and I needed a new challenge. So I reached out to a new client, Misguided, and the agency won it, and I got asked to be part of the new business and marketing team for MediaCom. And I was doing that, and I was learning all about how commercials were done, contracts were done, how they won business, how the company made money. So I learned really about how the MediaCom business in Manchester was run, as well as how we were winning clients and how we were working on them. But there was one piece missing, and that was digital. I didn't have digital in my skill set. So I thought, if I'm going to future-proof myself, I need to learn about digital, otherwise I'm going to be extinct within a couple of years. So Steven, I always do this. I'll do this throughout. I'll call him Steve. He's now Steven, isn't he? He's very, but he started following me on Twitter. And when there was only about 25, 30 people there, and I looked into what they were doing at Social Chain. When I say Steve, I mean Steven Bartlett. And they'd just done this big creative outdoor ad that was, Zlatan had gone to, was it United? Must have been. And it was like, instead of, it was like Manchester welcome to Zlatan on the ad, and they'd put it up in the centre of Manchester. And I just thought, this is really disruptive and really fun. So I had a good conversation with them, went backwards and forwards, and started as ops director without having a clue about digital and social.
I tell you what, Katy, there are not many people who could say that Steven has been following them.
Yeah,
Isn't that amazing,
true.
right?
Yeah, that's very true. Steve followed me, yeah. He said that actually.
He discovered me.
Yeah, he said that on his podcast. He couldn't remember how I started. And I actually voice noted him and I said, I started because you started following me on Twitter. That's how it all began.
Amazing. So you went in as ops director. I think it was within 6 months you ended up becoming MD.
Yep.
The fastest career climb that anyone could ever have. I mean, what's going on?
Oh, in my head, panic, honestly. It was 6 months. It was after about 3 months, Steve had decided he wanted to go to New York and open the New York office, and was thinking about the structure of the company and how we could move it forward. And in those 6 months, I'd come in and really understood, because I knew MediaCom structure. I knew how we were making money. I knew how we were costing campaigns. I knew how we were set up as accounts teams and all that sort of stuff. So I'd made quite a few changes that had helped Social Chain with its growth. He asked me to apply to be a more senior role, it was at the time. And I just thought, why? Why is he picking me to do this? Why? But I did it because I'm quite determined. And I did the interview and I actually cried after I did it. I went and sat in Cafe Nero around the corner and thought, I've completely messed this up. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I've done it. And so I cried.
That sounds very much like imposter syndrome at play.
A huge amount of imposter syndrome.
Why?
Because I'd just gone into this company not having a clue what they did. And then all of a sudden I was actually in a room with investors and Steve and senior people pitching for running that company. And it just felt big. So I'd had it in my head that I was never going to get it. I thought, nah, that's it. I don't know. It just felt funny.
So then when you're in, and how do you push through that imposter syndrome?
I went to therapy. Yeah. I was so lucky that Social Chain offered therapy. So I was made managing director and I got it. And I think I cried again when I got it. But still at that point, I thought, why me? Are people going to look at me? Are the team going to look at me and think, why has she got this job? She's only just come in. She doesn't actually know what we do. All these things were going through my mind. sat in meetings with the biggest brands in the world, and I would sit in a corner trying not to say anything because I didn't want to make Social Chain look bad or let Steve down or anything like that. But as I say, because there was a therapy option, I knew that I wasn't doing myself any justice, and I needed to figure out a way of dealing with it. So I went to see Karen, and Karen was the one that said, "What do you think of when you think of a managing director?" And I was like, "Old man in a grey suit." And she's like, "Yeah, but you're not." I know. And that was it. She said, "I think you've got imposter syndrome." And then it's led me to be able to help other people with imposter syndrome, which I'm very proud of.
Tell us a little bit more. We'll come back to social. There's more to say there, but just since you've said it, tell us a bit more about how you help people.
So my first ever talk, and I'm sure we'll go into this because this is how my personal brand started. When I was made managing director. Before that, though, Steven had his daily vlog, and there was a camera videographer following him around every day, following whatever we were doing. And I always said, "Don't put me on camera. I don't want to be involved. I'm just here to learn. I don't want to be famous. Like, this isn't what I'm here for." He's so smart, though, that he put it as one of my objectives when he made me MD, that I had to build a personal brand. So I needed to figure out a way to do it that felt comfortable for me, because I could not have a camera following me around. I don't think I could do it now. And my first talk was around imposter syndrome and the fact that I'd learnt about this through therapy. And I thought, if I'm struggling with this, and the more research I did, I found out 70% of successful people struggle with it. If I'm doing this and I can figure out ways to help me from it, I can help other people. So that was my first ever talk, public speaking. Nice. And that's how I found my why.
I find it intriguing because clearly today, when it comes to personal branding, you're one of the most synonymous, leaders in the country, and represent so much of what you bring. And it obviously had humble beginnings, as you described it. But maybe what has it done for you? Because you've obviously been able to get over the hurdle and get over your sort of that syndrome, as it were, and then embrace it. And I wonder what has it done, and perhaps what advice would you have if someone's trying to lean into that thought?
I don't think I've ever got over it, though. I think it pops up all the time. And it's something that I've realised, especially now as I've changed careers, and we'll go into my career changes, I'm sure. But every time I've made a pivot, it's popped back up again. Imposter syndrome never really goes away, and I've used it now, and I've realised, and what I'm trying to help people with is that it's actually a motivator for growth. So instead of letting it hold you back, I'm using it now as an opportunity to learn. And I'm trying to flip the script on that with everyone else as well, to try and make it a motivator. But the benefit I found from personal branding is my network. I don't think I'd be able to go out and do the work I'm doing now with the consulting and with the coaching clients if I hadn't built that network. And I've tried to do it in the most authentic way that I can. And thankfully it's worked. Okay. I've just been honest.
Is that all it takes?
Yeah, that's it. You've just got to be honest.
There we go.
Yeah. There's so many polished things out there that I think what really resonated with people was that I would say what other people weren't willing to say.
So to state the bleeding obvious, authenticity is important to you. So how have you held on to that? The difficult times and the rough edges?
There's been a lot. The social change journey was so rapid that it was trying to keep up with that. And I was talking before we even started recording that I haven't done many of these recently because I was so drained from doing it at Social Chain that I felt like I needed a break. So I think for my own sanity, I could have pushed on with the personal brand, but it wouldn't have been authentic. I stopped my podcast, and I love doing the podcast, but I found it just taking too much of me. So I've really taken a bit of a step back from everything, but always niggling in the back of my mind was like, nearly 70,000 followers on LinkedIn, all this stuff going on, and I just couldn't lose it. Couldn't lose it, so I'm back.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's fine.
We're very grateful for that.
Thank you.
There you go. I mean, I think it does take a toll, though, and I wonder if people almost glamorize the world of influencer. Not to say that that's kind of the main thread of what you're doing, but there clearly is lots of influencers who do this sort of thing for a living, and the unintended consequence of that, I think, is is a lot of burnout and sort of that sort of FOMO of kind of what's my next post, what's my next this and my that, and then all of a sudden, it's almost like pressure to kind of constantly perform, looking at those analytics every day. And I wonder if you either have clients that kind of deal with burnout or having to almost deal with burnout yourself, perhaps, if that's some of the underlying things that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think I was burnt out at the end of Social Chain. I think part of the reason that I wanted to stop the personal brand was because I'd done so much had gone on with that growth, and it was so fast that I just needed a break from everything and everything associated with it. I don't know if I've said that before. But yeah, I just needed to separate myself. Not because I didn't enjoy it, and not because I'm not incredibly grateful for it, but I just needed a rest.
Do you think Social Chain will always sort of be in the shadow of Steven Bartlett?
I'm not sure. I don't feel like I am. I feel like lots of people are interested in him, but I would like to think that now I'm carving my own path. And the company was successful because of the team, not just because of Steve. And thankfully, he talks about that as well. And if you look at all the people that have left, it's actually amazing how many businesses have been built from the Social Chain alumni.
It's true.
We've got cookies and donuts business that is amazing. We've got a coffee shop business that's going all over and going global. We've got Feel Good Club Girls, which is like mental health and cafe, but they've got nearly 500,000 followers. There's people that I'll have forgotten. There's just so much going on from the people that have left. I think that entrepreneurial mindset that we all had has just spiraled into other things. So
very cool.
Yeah.
So much legacy.
A lot.
Steven, I mean, yeah, not many people get to sort of say that, but also Gary Neville. So you've worked with some amazing people. Maybe for both of them, what are maybe the one thing you've taken away that you've tried to emulate or be?
The thing I'm always most in awe of people like Steven and Gary is their ability to know what's next before anyone else. They've just got like this future vision. It's like they literally know, right, this thing's going to be big and we should go for it.
See around the corner.
They can see around the corner.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it. It's amazing. If I could emulate that, I would. And working with Lux Collective, Ben at Lux Collective is the same. He knows what's coming on social. And I think it's because they're so obsessive about things. Like the Overlap launch was because Gary knew what would work. And Stick to Football was one of those projects. So I think it's that. I think they're just so good. And I've never been around someone who can walk in the amount of businesses that Gary owns. And he will go from one meeting to another about different businesses, but he knows his numbers for every single business when he goes in a room. It's very impressive. He is one of the best people to be around. Yeah, so kind, so generous, but just so amazing in how he operates as well.
I think he'll appreciate hearing that.
Yeah.
Katy, you talk about some people being able to see around the corner. So without that pearl of wisdom per se at the moment, I'd love to get your take on how you see the current world of marketing here today. What are some of the key sort of mega things that you're seeing which you see as opportunity?
I am loving community building. That's one of the things. I can't fully see around. Maybe I can see around the corner. Maybe I'm doing myself a bit of a disservice, but because I get obsessed with things, right? So community building and brands like Tala, like Refi, are doing just incredible. Represent is probably one of the best examples where they're just building obsessive communities that are just attaching people to brands for the long term. So I'm loving that. I'm loving the TikTok world. I'm loving watching how people are buying through TikTok and the way that that's all changing. And I'm so lucky that I'm being part of that at Lux Collective, because that's what they specialize in, is TikTok lives. And also just understanding the algorithm and how TikTok works, that followers don't matter on there anymore. You follow in the content. What you get served is what you're watching. It's the algorithm that serves your content. It's not all about who you follow nowadays. So yeah, probably those things.
Interesting.
Just on TikTok, so Richie and I were at a dinner last night, and Alex Mahon, CEO of Channel 4, was there doing it was the Marketing Society annual lecture. And she was really talking around the Gen Z and evolution of culture, role of content, and some of the positives and negatives. And she made the comment about now consumption has become a solo experience. Content used to be sort of more of a communal thing. I mean, it's maybe just an edge into the fact that there's some upsides and downsides to social media. So I'd just love to get your perspective on the balance of those two things.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for social used in the right way. And I think Social Chain was built on two things. It was built on people with experience in the marketing world, like myself, like my directors, Paul and Simon, other people that we brought in who'd worked in other agencies, coupled up with kids in their bedroom who'd just created these pages of influence on social. That part is the bit that really excites me about social media, and the fact that you can learn so much on there. TikTok's like a pool of exciting education now if you use it in the right way. And I love the fact that it's now a search engine, and I can just go on there and it can help me with where I should go and eat when I go on holiday, where are the best places to go. It's an absolute plethora of gold if you use it correctly. But the comparison side of it, I think, is the biggest struggle for people. I had someone on my podcast actually that was a comparison coach, and the best thing she said to me was, you should use your Instagram like you do your Pinterest. So you're picking things you want to see. Whereas I think on Instagram and TikTok, we're just mindlessly scrolling, and then we get fed more of the same stuff because the algorithm doesn't actually know what hurts you and what doesn't. You should actually go and be mindful about what you want to watch, and then train your algorithm to be the stuff that you want to see. Easier said than done, but it's a very fair point.
Yeah.
Katy, do you think there's a glass ceiling in marketing?
No. I think there's opportunities, and I think things change so much. I think we were just talking then about about single view. But I think that's where communities have come in for brands, because there's a loneliness epidemic. So things like that, being able to see what's coming and then adapt to it, I think is always an opportunity for.
I hear you on that, and I partially agree. I wonder. I've got a little hypothesis, and it's very generalized, so maybe not for all, but I think that part of the influencer revolution is a consequence of people feeling quite disaggregated with mainstream marketing, or perhaps lack of opportunity that kind of exists for them, and maybe a lack of desire to even work in the bigger brands anymore, because of the ways of structures of working and the like. And therefore, a lot of these young people, next generations, are seeking a new way in which to kind of operate, because they don't necessarily see a big opportunity to scale, to forge a career in that area. And I just wonder if, to what extent, you think that's somewhat, there's any sort of truth in that thought. But I'm fearful of the big brands missing a massive trick here, basically.
I think big brands can miss a big trick. I think working with some of these really quick startups, like the fast growing startups like I am, what we're getting in terms of talent coming through are the ones that really want to learn. So they are content creators, and but they want to be part of a fast-paced brand that are doing some really exciting work. And that's probably where the big brands are going to miss out on, because it's the same as anything though, any big company versus new companies. It's part of the reason why I left MediaCom to go to Social Chain, because MediaCom was like an oil tanker to change anything. It was like trying to turn this massive beast to even make a difference. As soon as you get into a fast-moving company, you can change the world in a very quick instant.
So now that you've contrasted those two experiences, MediaCom, Social Chain, if you were advising sort of next generation coming through as to how best to forge their career, what would be some of that advice, and where would you almost get them to start?
Care. 100% care. Find what you care about, because you're going to go into that company and put your all into it. So it could be that you really care about the work or the clients that these big agencies are doing, or you could really want to go into these fast-paced like new startups. But you've got to find what you care about, because then I always hired on care, always. I didn't hire on CVs. I don't look at CVs. Speak to people. So we get all the CVs and I have a bit of a scan, but I don't really pay too much attention to them. I do 10-minute conversations with people. If I think that their energy and their care is there, then I'll get them in for a proper interview. I don't believe in a traditional interview process.
Nice.
It's because it works for us. It worked for Social Chain, and we had a group of people. We were seen as a cult at one point, but that was because we just had a group of people who cared deeply about what we were doing.
I want to get into the cult and the highlights, but you've talked about care and you talked about why, and then we didn't quite follow up there. So I'd just love to know how you articulate your why.
Oh, yeah. If I can help one person with something that I've learned through my journey with what they're going through, then that's my why. So it helps me in so many ways. I could do a piece of content that doesn't reach many people, but I could get one comment that said that really helped me today. That's my why. So it takes away the need for comparison. It makes me feel good that I know that I've helped just one person. Yeah. I've got to realise as well, I've got so many people now that are seeing my content. It's like, when you put it into actually like visual terms, some football stadiums aren't filling that many people, which is wild. Yeah. So if I'm just if one person, if you went out on the street and just talked to someone and gave them some advice, you'd feel really good if they felt good from it. So that's the way. There's a
neurochemical high to being helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm a people pleaser and a fixer by nature, so I think it feeds into that.
Fixer. Hey,
I'm
Mark.
a fixer.
Yeah. So Mark's backstory, interesting. Talk about fixer. So I don't know if you know this, but Mark was the direct line guru who came up with the fixer campaign.
Richie, you flatter me. I didn't come up with it. I was in the pitch process, but somebody, not me, described it as the brand relaunch of the last decade.
Tell Katy about the lift moment.
We had articulated that we thought insurance was about fixing things. And so we had all this chemistry session, and there's a lovely chap called Richard Huntington, still a dear friend, and Paul Sabin, now sadly passed away. And so we had this chemistry session about being a fixer. And then Paul Sabin, in the lift going out of the building, said, I think I know what it is. I think it's about that character in Pulp Fiction, the guy who cleaned up Marvin's brains when he got shot in the head on the back of the Chevy. That's what it's insurance about. And then Richard Huntington actually said, like, we're way too early to jump to execution. We need to do all the strategy stuff first. But that literally unchanged, unfettered all the way through the process. And one of my proudest things, to link to what you said, is the fact that it's a bit of a super tanker organization, post-IPO, big old beast. And, Richie, you were there at the same time as well. To get something which was quite brave through, it's 10 reasons why it needn't have happened, but it did. But yeah, I mean, it was a lovely moment. It was like hairs on the back of the neck when I heard that story, and in the pitch, and when it first goes on air. Yeah. I'm sure you had lots of those. Actually, let's talk about your hairs on the back of the neck. No, well, that's moment.
What you can see my face like light up, because this is why I went into the industry. It's those sort of things, like those moments where people are coming up with these really creative campaigns, and what we're doing is we're selling things to people, but it's just so exciting to me. I don't know what it is, but that's been there my whole life.
So you're giving up that particular drug to what you're doing now, in a way, that creative freedom. No,
I've got it again now.
Okay.
I think I lost it when I was at Social Chain because I was MD and because my role pivoted into doing the people stuff. Yeah. And we went from 30 people to 130 when I left in the bit that I was responsible for. And we went from 2 million in revenue to 15 million in revenue for the bit I was responsible for.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad. I should give myself more credit. I've been told I don't own my achievements, so I'm now saying them out loud. So I think, but in doing that, my time was spent on people, culture, HR problems.
Okay.
That is not.
So actually one step removed from the
it's
action.
Not creative. And I don't like managing people. That's the other thing I've realised, so I try not to do it.
What, a leader that doesn't manage people?
Don't like it.
How does that work?
I don't do it now.
What?
I coach people.
Can you manage yourself at least?
No, I can't manage myself. I'm trying to get help because I don't know where I should be and when.
Oh, God. I tell you, I mean, rapid growth, right? I mean, that's incredible amounts of growth. I mean, and if you're at the heart of almost creating the infrastructure to support that amount of growth, how does that work? What's your sort of key takeaways there? And if you were going to advise someone, because everyone's seeking out that type of growth, so how do you build it in?
How did we do it? I don't even know. It was 650% growth in 6 years. It was massive. Do you know what? We just had fun. And that sounds really like silly to say that's what I'm attributing to the growth. But we just had the best time. We worked with the biggest brands in the world. We knew who we were. And we were really steadfast to that. We knew our values. We knew how to operate. We did work. Sometimes we had to do work that wasn't in our nature, but 9 times out of 10, we did work that aligned to our values.
Were you intimidated by some of the other big holding co-companies, agencies, or were you sort of very challenger-esque? And
I just loved taking them on. I loved it. I loved the fact that they were all watching us, and I loved the fact that going into pitches, they all knew that we were going to be there. Sometimes we didn't win. Sometimes, most of the time we did, but I love a fight. I love it.
A scrap.
I love a scrap.
Best and worst of times at Social Chain?
Best of times, there were so many highs, so many. We celebrated a lot. We celebrated everything. I think my this is it moment day was really early on. And we'd come down to London. The camera was following Steve around. But we went from meeting to meeting, and those meetings were Apple, Coca-Cola, New Look, River Island, something out. Like, there was just so many, and it was just like one after the other. And I was just in these offices. Bearing in mind I was doing new business for a northern media agency, where trying to get in the door of anyone like that is impossible. So just even walking into the Coca-Cola office and they're just lapping up everything we're saying, I thought, this is it, I've done it. I'm happy. So that was probably it. And just working with some of the biggest brands in the world. The lows, we made a lot of mistakes. And we had to make quite a few redundancies at times for the other part. So we had 2 parts to the business. We had a media part, which was the pages that we owned. So we were a media owner. And then the agency part. The media part had to make a lot of redundancies. And I was part of that process. And that was really horrendous. Because I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to be doing that to anyone. And it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. Yeah.
So I like the way you've chosen a path in your life and career where you actively chosen to avoid something you just have an allergic reaction to. That's very empowering, right? So is that at the heart of it?
Yes. I had coaching. I've got an amazing coach called Mark, and it was at the end. It was really, when sometimes things just happen at the right time. This company called Form in Liverpool reached out to me just as I'd handed my notice in, and I was lost. This was Social Chain. I just handed my notice in. I was really lost, very, very tired, really drained, and I went on a leadership away couple of days with them, and I got a coach from it called Mark, and he transformed my way of thinking, and he just helped me get back on track, just recognize what I'd done, recognize my strength, recognize what I had in me that I'd forgotten, and then told me that it's my time to have fun, and I've just taken that and ran with it. So I don't choose things that I don't have fun with anymore.
There are so many places I can go right now, but I'll stick on the technicals here, because the thing that I found interesting is when you said, you had that day in London and you were walking across all these phenomenal offices. What do you think was the key to getting those opportunities? How did you guys navigate and when others couldn't?
Yeah, storytelling. We were incredible storytellers, and not in a way that it's like made up stories. We just were really good at telling our story and the PR around it. And Steven is one of the best storytellers you will ever meet. He gets a lot of stick for it. People are quite doubtful of the things he says, but he's exceptional at it. It's another thing I'm really excited about in marketing, to be fair, is storytelling. And people like Grace Beverley's amazing at it. Yeah. There's Amy Smalls at Odd Muse. There's just certain people that are just really good at storytelling and taking you on that journey. Steve is one of them. And we just had all this excitement around us because of the PR and the things we were doing.
So are you then saying that storytelling as the concept, but Steve as the narrator in that sense, it then strikes me that Social Chain and Steven Bartlett and the brands that then became, so synonymous together was a bit of that secret sauce, and maybe the ... is then for coming back to that personal brand aspect. Would you rate a personal brand element in in an agency play to be quite important, because most holding codes don't do that. You know,
Yes.
that's not what the game is.
No, but 100%. That's why he made me do it as my KPI.
Interesting, isn't it?
Because as soon as I started going out on stage, it wasn't just Steve that was bringing in these clients. If I reached out to clients, they came because they'd seen me and saw what seen what I'd said and understood the way I was approaching culture and knew me talking about social chain culture, what we were building, how we looked after staff, all this sort of stuff, actually attached brands to us because they wanted to work with a company that lived like that. So yeah, personal branding, I think, is one of the most important things, and a founder, anyone can do, to be honest.
Do you know, Mark, this is interesting, right? Because, I mean, you look at all the whole course, ultimately today, what we've got is a bit of a veneer where you've got really a, you know, no face at all to a lot of the things that they do, certainly in the public domain. And I just wonder what a massive mistrick given the success that it had here.
Yeah, I mean, you could ask two questions. What advice would you give to holdcos? And then perhaps even more importantly, what is the agency of the future?
Ooh.
I mean, not easy questions, but you know.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I'm out of the agency landscape as well, so it's
But from that perspective, you've got a vantage point to say, well, actually say whatever you like. I mean, this is
I can say what I want.
No pressure.
What should the holdcos do?
I think there is a real fear around letting staff be adults. And I think in part of that we've seen a massive thing on return to the office. And I could talk about that for another hour because I believe that we should have an office, but I believe that there needs to be a reason to go to the office and it shouldn't just be forced. But in the same respect as personal branding, I think there is a fear that if people start building a personal brand, that they're going to become, their ego's going to get too big and they'll leave. The opposite is true. I would want anyone to be an advocate for working for a company I had. And I would want them talking about what they were doing because I know that it brings the money in. So I would say, yeah, this is why they're not doing very well, because they've turned into faceless corporations that are struggling to keep their clients and keep their staff.
On the return to work,
yeah,
it's fine. You can say that across all of. If you said that about one, you'd be in trouble. If you said that across all of them, it's
true,
fine.
Though, isn't it? There's a big exodus. There is, and I think
there is a real struggle for retention of talent.
I just find that, you know, talk about agency life, right? And I was an agency founder myself. If anybody were to ask me, you know, what would you do again? Would you recreate? I wouldn't say I'd want to be an agency owner. I mean, it's just a really hard graft in today's environment.
It's really hard, and there's only so many social chains. There's only so many, and I am so lucky that I was part of that, and I learned so much from it. I say I'm lucky. Like, I've got to stop saying I'm lucky because I work for it and I got there because of my experience. But it feels like it was the right place, right time for me, and I just lapped it up. Just took every opportunity from it and squeezed the life out of it until it squeezed the life out of me.
How did you do that, Katy? Tell us a bit more about how do you squeeze the life out of it for, you know, from your career, of course, giving back, but really useful for people.
I am super curious. There's some things like I will ask questions. I want to know more. I just want to learn from people who I admire. So I will sit in rooms and I will just listen. I don't talk. I don't overly talk. I won't put my two penneth in if it's not necessary. I will sit back and I'll listen, and then I'll add when I feel like it's right. But in sitting back and listening, I'm absorbing. I'm like a sponge. So those first few months I listened to Steve just talk. I listened to Dom talk, because Dom was just incredible at knowing social media and the platforms and the algorithm. And I used to and Ollie was just the best salesperson I've ever seen in my life. I used to just sit and just absorb it all. And then I'd take it away and I'd think about it, and then I'd use it to help build me up. I think just being curious, it's not difficult if you put your mind to it, but it's just a case of like knowing that there's always something new to learn.
It's a great metaphor or advice to people. Be a sponge. Love that. Practically, what advice would you give to people about how to effectively sponge it all up without just being sort of totally distracted by everything? Where's the juice?
Knowing what you're interested in, I think, is a big thing. Like, I've never had a plan. I've never had a career plan. Never thought, right, I want to be an MD, or I want to be a CEO, or I want to be now working for myself. Never had a plan. Still don't have a plan. And I always say I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But what I do know is I love learning, and I love learning about certain things that really spark me. And in finding out what those are, put me in places where I could be that sponge. So I think understand what it is that really gives you fire, and then ask, see, can I sit in that meeting? I really want to learn. We were exploring reverse mentoring when I was leaving Social Chain, and I think it's genius. So like I said before, our secret sauce was people who'd had experience in the agency world and had been there, done that, and knew how to service clients, coupled up with these people who just knew social better than anyone else. So we really wanted to do reverse mentoring, where I don't know anything about paid social. So if someone wanted to learn about how to run a company, they could come to me and I could come to them and learn about paid social. And that would have been brilliant if I'd had more time. But I got tired and left. But I think that, like, just a value exchange, it doesn't have to be, learning doesn't always have to be one way. And I think that is a really important point as well, that you can teach people both ways.
Can people pitch their seniors to say, would you like a reverse mentoring? Does it have to be initiated by the more senior person?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think the people who are experts in doing, the thing that you've got to realise when you're doing and you've just started out and you're absolutely obsessive about your craft, you look at people in leadership thinking that they know everything. You don't. You go into leadership and you actually have a massive crisis of confidence, if we're honest, and if people are really honest. You have a wobble about the fact that you're not doing the do anymore, and you don't feel as productive because you're not ticking everything off your to-do list like you used to. You're not, like, it's not tangible outputs that you were doing before. So you lose that bit of part. That's what I felt like, and I think that was part of my imposter syndrome as well. If I'd been able to just have that reverse mentoring and have someone say to me, do you want to learn about this latest thing? I'd be like, yes, please, tell me all. And then I'd feel like a little bit of boost going into meetings and feeling like I could talk about the Instagram algorithm change without blagging it.
I absolutely love the thought of, let's say, young people, but applies equally across the board, or being proactive with value adding to others, seniors, what have you it is. But all too often, people are too shy, underconfident, and when it comes to their own career, it just basically stifles them because they don't stand out as a consequence. And I really feel like if there was more, just take your chances, take your shot. Email those 20 people, email that CEO. You need that kind of stuff. You need that. That's how you break out. That's how you break out from the pack. And I really feel today that more young people need to do that, not be that solo kind of person.
So in our gig, he's the hustler, and I've learned so much from Richie as a hustler.
Oh, thanks for saying that on camera.
It's not a bad thing. You've just said it. You've just said it in a different way. It's just that I've given it a label.
Yep.
But like, things don't fall in your lap. You have to work for them, graft for them, and you also have to be ingenious and guile. So, what's you as the hustler?
Do you know what I always think? And I've realised this recently. I always think about regret. So with things like that, with opportunities like that, I always think, if I really want something, am I going to regret it if I don't do it? And if I think, I'm going to regret it, I try. And I don't think I've ever properly coupled that up with my actions, but that's always what I've done. And that's something that my mum's drilled into me from being small. Are you going to regret it if you don't do it? I think that's when we were queuing up for roller coasters and I'd try and back out at the last minute. She'd be like, you'll regret it if you don't. That stuck with me, I think, forever. So I think that hustle part of me has been, the determination part of me has been, I don't want to regret anything, and I want to basically I want to squeeze the life out of life. Like, I just want to take the most and make the most out of every moment.
It's interesting. In terms of framing my thought process on this, I may not be hitting the nail on the head on this, but I'm a northerner, and I grew up just across the border from Carlisle in a small town not far from Gretna Green. And I'm not sure. I mean, I think one of the things that I certainly found when I was a youngster was a bit of northern-southern divide that played out. And in some respects, and I can't generalize across the whole country, but some respects it gave me a little bit of a challenger mentality. To kind of, I'm going to come down to the capital and I'm going to do X and I'm going to do Y, but didn't know a soul, but I'm going to know a soul, as I come down. And I just wondered, to what extent is it almost a cultural thing that as you described? I don't know whether we can place it on a geographical thing, but where did that sort of hustle thing come from in you?
It might be because we always had a north-south divide in the agency world.
Yes.
And I always thought my career would need to develop in London. I never thought that I would get to where I knew I wanted to progress. I always wanted to progress, but I didn't know what it would be or what it would look like. And I always thought my progression would be in London, because I thought I'm not going to get there in Manchester. And then Social Chain, thankfully, was made and born in Manchester. Exactly. So I could stay. And I'm so grateful for that as well, because I'm like half an hour from my parents and they're getting old. So I get to spend time with them. And I'm like, I get those moments that I wouldn't have had if I'd moved away. But I think we were so... like, it wasn't, we were taking on, if we knew we were pitching against a London agency, we were like, right, come on.
Double as hard.
Yeah, we're going to do this and we're going to win. Yeah, maybe.
But by the way, is that symptomatic of, of the North in that sense? But I mean, how, if people are listening in who are living up in your neck of the woods or even or beyond that, and have that same feeling of actually, I have to make it down south. I mean, that's not true. Look what you've done.
I think it's changed. I definitely think it's changed now. I think when I was, how many years is it now since Social Chain? Like 7 to 10, is it? Whatever it was. Yeah. Whenever I started there wasn't that many agencies. But then since then, we just had a massive boom in Manchester of social media agencies. And now the brands that I'm working with, like they're so exciting. The work they're doing is so amazing, and they're in the North. Okay. So I think I was in my own little agency bubble and felt like there was an opportunity, but there actually probably was then and there is now. I just didn't see it.
Opportunity everywhere when you're looking for it.
Yep.
I can't skip past the roller coaster metaphor. I love metaphors. I'm going to give you the opportunity to have a little bit of a creative play.
Yes.
And like, how is the roller coaster a metaphor for life?
Yeah, it is. It's very much so. I've had a lot of highs, some loops, and then quite a few lows.
They're looking over the
just over that top bit, and the excitement when you do fall and then come back up again. I've had the Social Chain time personally, professionally was amazing, but personally I had quite a few losses. I had quite a few bereavements. I had a miscarriage while I was there. There was quite a lot, and I had a couple of relationship breakups. Those things all happened in the time that I was at Social Chain. So actually in that point in my life, there was a lot more that happened to me personally than had ever happened in my career before. Again, going back to the culture and the way that we supported each other, I can't thank the leadership team and Steven Bartlett enough for the way that he supported me and protected me in those times. They were just amazing. So, yeah, very much highs and lows. But as I say, I don't let it... I'm so grateful. I sound like a broken record, but I could let a lot of those moments hinder me, and I could have stopped and I could have given up, but I just love life. Love it.
There's a real risk that Social Chain is certainly the past pinnacle, but you've got to take it to new heights now. How do you do that?
I am focusing on fun, like I said, from my coach. So I feel like one of my strengths is knowing exciting things before, like knowing when to get involved in something.
Like coming on the podcast.
There
you go.
Great decision.
Yeah. And knowing that the brands that I'm working with have got something really exciting to do in the world. They're doing good things and they're doing it really well. So for me, that's what I'm focusing on now. I don't know what my thing that I'm doing now is going to look like. But I do know that I just want to have loads of fun doing it. I'm actually opening a content studio in Manchester with a TikTok live space.
Wow.
Yeah, because there isn't really anything like that. So it's a bit like Airbnb for content. There's a few of them around, but this one's going to be an event space as well with education in it to help people, because my experience in the industry and knowing how to build a personal brand, but also how to create content. So yeah, I'm excited to get that up and running.
Amazing. So you must be pretty tuned into how AI. We can't have an interview without talking about AI. Well, maybe it's embedded in this new venture.
It will be, hopefully.
But tell us a bit. If you can look around the corner a little bit, give us your take on AI.
I love AI, not from the fact that I want it to write my posts or take over my thinking, but I use it as a sounding board, especially being a solo. Yeah. I guess I'm a business owner now, even though it's just me. It's my company. So it feels weird to say that when there's just one of one. But yeah, as a solo business owner, it's great to have as a sounding board to understand very quickly frustrations, challenges, motivations of markets, to then be able to come up with really strong brand ideas, brand identities. And that's what I'm loving doing at the minute. I'm loving going in and figuring out, right, what is the challenge that we've got here, or what is something that we could really solve, and then figuring out how to put those brands in those places. And I'm using AI a lot for that, a lot. And I love the fact that you can use it to help you with Canva, because I'm not an expert in design, but there's ways that it can help level me up. So I'm trying to, if you use it correctly, if you use really good prompts, it can be a brilliant tool. I'm also using it to plug in if I'm buying some food and I'm checking whether it's got nasties in it.
That's a nice tip. I was listening to someone you know well, Oliver Yonchev, and he was talking about the future of podcasting, ironically enough. And the question that he pitched up was whether it's all just going to be synthetic conversation, and whether this authentic human experience will then sort of dissipate in sort of, vis-a-vis a more AI avatar stroke type of thing. Show of hands, in a live audience, what have you. Very few people say that was going to be the reality, but he was quite adamant as he went through that actually in a few years time. Well, there you go. And I find it interesting because, you look at things like TikTok, you look at AI avatars, you look at the way that that's going to change too. And I just wonder, I'm hopeful there's a space for human endeavor within these things, but I'm also a bit cynical, kind of going, geez, as the tech gets so good, will there be a need?
I think so, because I think we are, as I've talked about before, in this pandemic of loneliness. And I think if we move more towards AI, it's just going to exacerbate that. And I feel like the way that we're going to get cut through is by real conversations. And I think that's why my personal brand has done so well as it has, because I will just say things and I will be authentic. And I think if you're using AI to try and do that, it's never going to be authentic.
True. So
I think people need and crave those conversations. I need it. I need to hear real people talk about real things. Yeah, so that would be my take on it. I think what people will see
best at Ollie.
The real.
There we go.
I'll tell him. He's probably right in a lot of respects, but I'm hopeful that there's still going to be elements where we're seeking out the real.
I hope so too. I really hope so too. I want to pick up on the, you talk about the pandemic of loneliness. And I'm really fearful about that. And I'm really fearful about the next generation. In fact, we were listening to a report from Alex Mohan, the CEO of Channel 4 yesterday. And Channel 4 did a lot of research into the thought that actually younger people are less happy in this generation than they have been in the past. And they also, a lot of young people feel disenfranchised, recognizing that actually they're probably poorer than what their previous generations had been, and see an outlook of less opportunity. And I wonder what's your thought on how young people are feeling on the ground today and around their prospects?
I really worry. And it came from leading the team through COVID. And I could see how many different circumstances there were being locked at home and what that did. My worry is, and I touched on it slightly before, is that office and working from home. And the fact that people don't want to go into the office, but I wouldn't be sat here today if I didn't go into an office and start being a sponge. You can't be a sponge if you're working from home. I couldn't build a network like I have if I had worked from home. from the age of 21. I've got friends that I started on my grad scheme. One of them went to work at TikTok, and now she's an MD of a social agency. We wouldn't have met. We would never have communicated because she was doing TV and I was doing press. That really scares me. But I think what is happening is leaders of companies and managers are approaching it in a way that we used to be managed. So we used to be wanting to go into work because we felt like we had to. Whereas now I think the opposite is true, that you have to give people a reason, but you have to make them feel empowered and it's their decision to go in. And I don't believe that is happening anywhere.
Sounds like an impossible juggle.
I don't think it is. I think if you gave people a choice of how they want to work, but within realms of how you want it to work, so you give them a few options, right? Okay, you can work from home, but I also think if you want to come in and learn, these are the days that you can come in and learn, or these are the things we'll put in the office so you can get what you want out of it. I don't think we have one-way. I think we have one-way conversations. I don't think we have two-way conversations with staff, and I think that's what's holding us back. I'm actually reading a book called Positive Discipline, which is a parenting book. I'm not a mum, got no kids, but the reason I'm reading it is because I think that modern way of parenting, where it isn't punishing people or it isn't forcing people to do something, it's actually giving them options within the realms of what you actually want as an outcome, is the future of how to manage the next generation.
You know what I really miss as a part of this conversation? I started my career at HSBC, and there certainly was no working from home back in that time. But it used to be such a wonderful moment where we used to have a Friday evening drink in the pub with your colleagues. And it was, not everyone went, right? But it was, and largely it was even just one or two or whatever. I was the straggler. But nevertheless, the point being is, it was just such a wonderful cultural experience to actually get to know people. And the camaraderie that was then created as a consequence was something that's really held me in good stead. I mean, I still know those people today, many, many, many years later.
You're welling up over there, Richie.
I know, right? But it's just, I know it's terrible to try and, nostalgic and all the rest of it. And I know times have changed, but certainly today, when you hit Friday at 5 o'clock, you're sitting in your desk, you've shut the laptop off, and you're like, and now what?
Yeah.
It's just.
I think we need to find a new way because people aren't drinking like they used to. I was the same, obviously being from the north and being from Manchester. We like a drink. So every Friday we were out at lunchtime and probably never went back. But now it's changed in terms of what people do for their own socialising. And again, we've not adapted. We just expect the same as what we did. The same respect for managers isn't there because they want a two-way conversation. The thought that goes into culture isn't there. There's just so many things that need changing. So I can get a bit on a high horse about this because it's something that I'm quite passionate about.
Well, let's go to another opportunity for you to get on a high horse. We've talked at the edges of diversity. We talked a little bit about North and South. But I mean, here we are, in the US, federal funding pooled for any organisation that's got an EDI, DEI programme. What's your take on where we're at in the world in terms of diversity?
I really struggle with diversity because I've never been impacted personally in my career, I don't think. Couldn't say in any moment of my career I've been held back because I'm a woman, which I know I am very fortunate. But it worries me. I hear the stats about how much funding goes into female-founded companies, and that is incredibly concerning. One of the best things that has stuck with me from when I was at MediaCom, I was in a meeting with Karen Blackett, and she said, you can't be what you can't see, basically, but it was more around if you've got the same looking people in an office and you're talking about how to reach a different market, you're completely out of it because you're not going to know, you're going to be coming up with ideas that are completely wrong. And I think you need that level of thought and consideration. And I think me being an MD of Social Chain was part of that change because I brought empathy, care, supportive systems to what was a leadership role that hadn't really been done too much before. This is why I had in my head that an MD was an old man in a grey suit, sat in a corner, didn't talk to anyone. And that's why I had imposter syndrome. So I've managed to kind of change that a little bit. But in terms of actual stats, I'd love to see more female-founded businesses get the support they deserve, because we need that diversity of thought. And yeah, it's worrying.
I would almost argue that your subconscious is the biggest thing that held you back, because you've had that perception of that person and you've always suffered as a consequence of that picture in your head.
That and society. I Google imaged it. I Google image managing director when I first got it, and all the images were an old man in grey suits.
Yeah.
And the first image of a woman was a Getty image. It wasn't real. It's changed now. But yeah, so it wasn't just my subconscious, it was society telling me.
Well, it's true. Very true. Katy, it's been a phenomenal interview. I'm going to pitch up the last question here. And I really want to know, I mean, you've worked with such a plethora and diverse group of very, very influential people. Who would you say, and perhaps maybe you can name one or two people, who have you admired the most, and what perhaps is the one or two things you've taken away from that individual?
I have to say my dad. So my dad broke his back just before I was born. So when I was born, he was in a plaster cast from his armpit to the bottom of his back. God. Both my parents were teachers, and he had to take early retirement from breaking his back. So he had to pivot to do something completely different. The family needed money, so he had to completely change his career because he couldn't do what he'd always done, and he's had to deal with that his whole life. He is one of the best sounding boards for me, probably because he knows my reactions to things and he knows how I respond, so he's very sensible in that. So my dad, for sure. I couldn't sit here and not say Gary, because, as I say, I don't think I've ever been in a room with a man who is so on top of everything whilst everything else is going on around him. And just the excitement of being around all of his businesses was just so much fun. And then, do you know what? We had people come in to Social Chain from an apprenticeship scheme called Juice Academy. And there's a couple of people that we brought in to Social Chain who I just learnt so much from. And it goes back to that reverse mentoring. They hadn't been to uni. They couldn't afford to go to uni, but they came into Social Chain and they taught us so much. Harrison is now on the Overlap. He's now presenting. He's one of the presenters on a show called The Breakdown. And I am so proud of him. And he's taught me so much. So, yeah, it's a bit of both, really. Harrison won't be expecting that shout out.
No, and all three of those were lovely. And so I just want to say thank you for a great conversation. And I'm going to end on that notion of you really love life, and there's a lot more to do, eh?
So much more. Thank you so much for having me. I've loved it. Could have talked for ages.
Certainly could have.